Happy Tuesday. Hope you all had a good weekend. I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, I get a stream today. I actually didn't expect to feel that way. And so it's really cool knowing that I'm like excited to be here and to be doing this. Let me go ahead and press send on Twitter. All right, we're all set. So the link's on Twitter. Those of you who are subscribed, you also get notifications that the stream started. You know what? It doesn't look too bad. I forgot to put band-aids on my hands. I have eczema, so I'm sorry if you see some discoloration on my hands. Excuse me. So today we are going to be finishing, or at least almost finishing, Petra's mask. We got started on it last week. We figured out how long the stripes needed to be. We figured out how much seam allowance we needed for each of the stripes because of the way that they are going to be applied onto the mask. And then we also cut out the applique glue that's necessary for making sure that the fabric, the top fabric, stays on the bottom. And so the first thing that we're going to do today is sew up these little cuts in the fabric right here. And you might be wondering, like, why is it that I cut out this? Why do I need to make a cut into the fabric? And I thought about that too, and it confused me for a while, but a good example would be plushies. So have you ever looked at a plushie and then you see, like, let's say it sits flat on the bottom, it has this little like plus because the lines go up the sides of the plushie like this. So that little plus, just kidding, I'm talking about the wrong thing. So if you look at a squishmallow, let's say we have a squishmallow right here, and then you have, this is the back, this is the front. Hi Kisu, thanks for coming. You see a little like seam. It doesn't cover the whole distance of the belly, but it's visible from the bottom to the base. And that's because when you have like a full circle, when it turns into a three-dimensional shape, it doesn't have the same curves as it does on paper. So like this curve wouldn't be apparent if this little seam wasn't here. So that's what we're gonna do first. We're gonna sew up these edges right here so that when we open it up, the bottom line is continuous and the top line is continuous. And even though it's not perfectly like symmetrical on both sides, or even though it curves a little bit, that is okay because the mask itself is not going to be symmetrical. Right here, it's gonna have to meet at a point. And so it's okay if the lines are not directly straight like this. So I'm going to introduce my sewing machine. Yay! I've had this sewing machine for maybe about 3 years now. When I first started sewing, I used someone's really old sewing machine. It was their grandma's sewing machine. And I had to troubleshoot a lot on it because it just wouldn't hold tension. And I'll explain what tension is in a second. But I don't know, can I lay down the sewing machine? I don't want to move my camera just because I'm scared I won't be able to get the same angle again. I wonder if I can tilt it. There we go, I'll just hold it up. Oh no, I could just lay it down on that. Sort of. Alright, so this is my sewing machine. It's number 4. Hold on, let me check. This thing's pretty heavy, by the way. It's model 4423. It is considered a heavy-duty sewing machine. This sewing machine was about on sale, like $250, and I got it as a gift from my family, um, which I really appreciate. So it's a brand called Singer. Singer is well known for their sewing machines. They say if you have a Singer, you can have a Singer for the rest of your life. And so I'm hoping to also have this for the rest of my life. Um, Sometimes you can get like $70 sewing machines. They're white, they're a lot smaller, but they're also not as durable, and their parts are more likely to either break or come apart. So this like $250 machine is supposedly supposed to last forever. It is heavy duty because I actually don't know too much the difference between regular sewing machines and heavy duty in terms of like the actual machinery itself. Um, but this machine should be capable of handling thicker fabrics like the first thing I think of is like carpet. It's not necessarily carpet. I forget the name. Like canvas. Canvas would be a material that this machine could handle. Um, Essentially, what I know is that this machine can absolutely handle cotton because cotton is thin. It's basic, and so sometimes I feel like this machine is too much for my needs. But I'd rather have a heavy duty machine for thicker fabrics or for bigger projects than not. And so move it up a little bit. That's the bottom of the machine. That's the bottom of the machine. I'm gonna hold it from top. This is actually a little compartment here where I put bobbins in it. So let me explain like the difference between a bobbin and top thread. So if you look at this area right here, this is where you thread the top thread. So when you sew, there's a top thread and a bottom thread, because when the needle comes down and pokes through the fabric, it's pulling the bottom thread to make sort of, it just interlocks. So the whole thing about the machine is that it interlocks the top and the bottom thread in order to create a seam. And so normally your top thread, you got all this other stuff up here, your top thread sits right here. It goes through the machine here, here, here. It comes out to the needle down here. And then your bobbin thread is already loaded. And there is a setting on the machine that allows you to wind whatever color you want for the bobbin at the very top of the machine. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic. That's what this is for. Speaking of which, I gotta switch that over. So yeah, that's the basics of the machine. I think I will have a stream later on that goes into like how to use a sewing machine. I think that would be really fun to do, and it'd be really good information for people to have. Uh-oh, my camera's frozen. Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna unplug it real quick. Oh, there we go. It's alive. Oh, that scared me. I didn't know what would happen if that actually, like, if unplugging it and replugging it didn't work. Alrighty. So now I'm gonna use my sewing machine to sew up these edges. For now, hold on, I'm gonna move my sewing machine out of the way. This way. So for now, since this is a seam that's going to be invisible, since I am sewing it from the inside, yeah, I'm excited that you're excited for it. Thank you. Where am I sewing? Oh, okay. This little cleft right here, that's what I'm sewing. all the way down here. This seam is invisible, as in when I flip it inside out, you're not going to see it. So it doesn't matter what fabric that I choose. Hi, paper. So I could honestly use black for either of these. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my machine. All right, I'm going to risk it a little bit and move this up. Yay. All right, it's going to look a little warped, and I'm sorry about that. But let me grab my black thread. So I have this big spool of thread, and this doesn't fit up here, right? I mean, I can make it try. Does it actually move? Actually, I've never tried this before. Okay, I'm gonna take it off. I don't like that. Because whenever you put fabric or like thread up here, you want... Hold on, I'm gonna unplug my video camera again. I'm surprised that this didn't happen last time where my video camera was buffering this way. I wonder if it's actually because of the cord that's plugged into the camera itself, because it is bent right now. And I'm wondering if that's like causing these issues with the camera. Please work. I unplugged you already. Ah! Scary. Yeah, okay. I just know I'm either going to have to reinforce it, so putting tape there so it just doesn't move, or just not touch. So I'm just not going to touch the camera for the rest of the stream. But I'm going to go ahead and thread it now. So specifically with this kind of thread, when there's so much of it and you can't place it on the top of your machine, you actually have to do a crazy like workaround with it. You have to put the thread separate from the machine, hang the thread from actually something above your machine so that it falls naturally, and it's supposed to maintain tension. So I have a little makeshift stand right here, like just a little wire that I put around my lamp, and that's what I use to hold the thread. So here's my thread. You can't see behind Petra, but this is the spool, and I'm going to drag this all the way over here. Whee. And then I have to wrap it around. It comes off. Comes off of this actually. Oh, wrap it around the handle of the machine, and then I can go forward. So it has to snag in places to make sure the thread doesn't move, but it also can't be tight enough to change the tension of the thread as it goes through the machine. So now I'm going to, this is the first step. You lock it in here. There is a hook here. You put the thread around the hook, and then you drag it down. And you can't see this because it's sideways, but the motion is this. So I'm going down and back around. At the very top here, this hook is connected to the hand wheel. So the hand wheel allows you to stitch individually if you need to, or quote unquote reverse. You never want to reverse your hand wheel. But it's very important that when you're threading, this hook is at the very top so that it catches onto your fabric. And you do that by turning your hand wheel until it's in the proper setting. And I'm going to pull the thread all the way down, around a hook, around another hook, and then finally onto my automatic needle threader, which will allow me to thread the needle without having to focus and just poke the thread through it. So have you guys ever had to thread a needle before? Let me show you. Where'd my needles go? Huh? So normally I have needles on my little tomato here. Sorry guys, it's gonna be blurry. Well, for some reason, I don't have any, and I'm a little scared that they somehow got absorbed into the tomato, but I'm pressing onto it and I don't feel anything. Um, in that case, I don't know where my needle is, but I'll just go ahead and demonstrate it with my hands. So the top, so a needle is sharp like this, and at the very top, there's this little circle like this. And then all you do is you try to push your thread, you try to push the thread through the circle. And it becomes a big issue, if and because the thread is very small and the eye is very small too. So when you have a sewing machine, the needle is actually pointed straight, and then the eye is on the very bottom of the needle instead of being at the top. Um, and so having an automatic needle threader is really, really, really nice. All right, again, I'm sorry that it's blurry. It's because the camera, the sewing machine is really close to the camera, and I can't do anything about that as long as I'm sewing. So I noticed that when I sew, my mic indeed picks up on the sound. So I'm going to mute while I'm sewing and then unmute myself after. So right now I just reach into this little compartment and then I pulled out a bottom bobbin. So if you see the color is black, it is made of exactly the same thread as the one that I have threaded into my machine here. And I'm going to go ahead and place it into the little bobbin area. I can show that at a different time, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do it. There we go. You have to, you can't just like place the bobbin thread in there and then start sewing. You have to have, it's like you have to start it. So you have to already, sorry, the top thread has to already pull up the bottom thread to start. That's a little hard to demonstrate without actually being able to show you. But now that I've loaded my top thread and my bottom thread, I'm gonna go ahead and sew this little angle here, and I'm gonna mute while that's happening. Just kidding, I have to plug in my machine first. All right, so you're gonna see this light turn on. I actually have never tried turning the light off because it's just always helpful to have light where you're sewing. I've tried turning it on while the camera is in a different position, and it's very, very difficult to see. So I considered turning it off, but that's okay. So I'm placing the fabric about 1/4 of an inch away from the needle. So instead of putting the edge of the fabric right where the needle is going to stitch, I put it over to the side so that the needle is going to come here. So I'm going to go ahead and mute. Okay, so my thread is wound tight and that'll cause problems. So I'm going to move it a little bit and hopefully that'll relieve some of the tension that was on the thread. I'm praying my camera is going to come back any second now. If it doesn't, we may just be stuck in this position. I will just have to narrate what's going on. And then maybe just put up pictures on the screen. That might just be the easiest way to do it. I already plugged and unplugged you, my friend. All right, I shoved the wire a little bit farther into the camera, so I'm hoping that that actually helps. I'm gonna unplug it one more time. Oh, nice. Okay, so I have to unplug it and then double click on the source. Whatever. Okay. So I'm gonna move this out of the way. Things are no longer blurry. You can see the thread. So what I did here is that I just stitched down the line. I backstitch meaning I didn't just start and continue all the way down. I started, went back, and then continued to make sure that my thread doesn't come undone in the initial location that the needle enters the thread. So I'm gonna cut off the loose strands. You always want to cut off loose strands after you're done sewing, or specifically creating a seam, because you don't want your previous threads to get mixed up with the thread that you're currently working with. So I cut off all the pieces. Ta-da! Now we have a nice finished seam. And then these two little pieces on the inside are going to be pressed flat. Actually, I need to cut that. Right here. They're going to be pressed flat on the inside so that when I put it on the nose bridge, it doesn't create extra mass. So instead of it being all to one side like this or like this, we're gonna peel it open and then iron that flat. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same to the orange piece. Alrighty, so that's really the only stitching I have to do right now. I'm probably gonna cut the thread, disconnect it, and then take the machine just entirely off my table so I don't have to deal with it. Here we go. Now we have a little seam here at the top. Yes! So these scissors, I love these scissors. They're easy. I just have to set them down on my desk, grab the sides like this, and then cut, rather than having actual scissors and then putting my fingers through them, positioning my hands correctly, putting tension, and then cutting. So they've been my favorite tool so far. I never really use my smaller scissors anymore ever since I have these, but it makes sense because these are just a lot easier to use. Let's move this way. Now we have a nice seam. If you look really, really closely, you can actually see that I use black thread. You could see the black here. It's okay. I don't think it's gonna show too much, but I think in the future I will use orange thread to make sure that it, or yellow thread, to make sure that it blends in a little bit more. Let me actually check what kind of threads I have right now, what color would match the most. Alright, so I have this orange color. I have this yellow. Okay, absolutely, this yellow would match more than this orange. This orange would really stick out. So I'm going to use, when I'm top stitching, I'm going to go ahead and use this yellow, and I'm hoping that it's going to accentuate the brightness of the yellow. Interesting color theory, but whatever thread that you use accentuates that color in the fabric. So if I use this orange, it's gonna make this yellow look darker, more goldenrod-y. And then if I use this yellow, it's gonna bring out the highlights in this fabric, so it's gonna look a little bit lighter. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my sewing machine. You're gonna see the light disappear. Boop. Unplug. I'm also pulling it out of, okay, so I plugged in my sewing machine to an extension cord. You're supposed to put it into the wall, but so far I haven't had any issues with my machine getting plugged into the same thing as my computer. Red flags. Unfortunately, I also don't have a choice, so I'm gonna do it anyways. Snip fabric, or slip fabric. Uh-oh. Don't die. Hello? No. I want to keep trying to mess with the camera to see if it's gonna work, but it might just be too much work. Like it's clearly not having a good time right now, so I don't think forcing it would be a good thing. So I think what I'm gonna do is transition. I'm gonna transition to the Zatsudan screen and then just post pictures as I'm going along. And then still like narrating as I go along. Sorry that this is happening. Yeah. We'll just stay on this screen for the time being. Alrighty. So I'm gonna have my phone handy, that way I can upload photos as they're happening. Okay. I think I can make this work. So now what we're gonna do, we have to put on the applique glue, and we do that by ironing it for about 8 to 10 seconds. So last time we were here, we cut out 2 different sizes, one for the orange strip and one for the black strip. And we're going to be putting these on the insides of the strip, so that when we iron on the strip onto the base fabric, the applique glue will make sure that it stays on and there's no gaps inside the strip. So I have a picture. Man, it's so weird, like making all this space on my desk and then not being able to, like, not having my camera on, not having to be conscious where my hands are on my table. I'm sorry if my table looks a little crusty. It's just, I guess we'll just call them sewing photos. It's just like splashes of old paint on the table, acrylic paint. That could easily come off if I like use a brush, but that would require effort. Alright, image. Just call it 1. Just start labeling these as we're going along. Where did my folder go? Huh? Oh, I didn't put it in stream. Got it. Okay. Voila! Oh yeah. Really, really big. free size. I'm just gonna cover my fugi. There we go. Alrighty. The music is a little too loud. Okay. Is that better, Friar? I turned it down. Actually, I didn't have background music on when I was showing my video. I meant to look up other tracks, but I wanted to try something different this time, and so I just didn't put the music. But especially because there's not going to be a lot of, well, you're only going to see pictures, I'll keep the background music on for this page. So let me know if that's a little bit better with the music. So yeah, this image here, just lock that, okay. These strips of glue are gonna go in here. And then, so the thing that I need to, okay, perfect, thank you, Friar. So the thing that we need to figure out is the order that we're gonna put it in. Because there's three things that we need to do. We need to iron on the applique glue onto the black fabric. We need to iron the seam allowances inward, that way they stay that way and don't come out when I'm sewing. And then 3, actually ironing on the black fabric to the white base fabric. And things get a little complicated when the seam allowance can overlap the glue. So I'll go ahead and send a picture of what I'm talking about. So I haven't quite figured out if it's okay. Well, no. So it's a problem that the seam allowance is really big, because if it covers the entire surface of the glue, then that means that the glue, like the black fabric, will not adhere to the base white fabric if the black fabric seam allowance is covering up that area. Oops, wrong photo. Oh, it's so big. Oh, you're gonna see my fingies just blasted. Full screen. Alright. Image, so we'll call that number 2. And then... Ah, why is it so big? 1. Oh. And it's not even that I need the image on the top of it. I just need this right here. So you guys are going to be covered for a second. I'm sorry. So I did a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but this width right here, I actually forgot how wide I think it's just, is it just 1/2 inch? Yeah. So if the total width of the glue of the stripe itself is 1/2 inch and the seam allowances are 1/4 inch, that means when they're folded in, it's gonna cover up the glue entirely. Oh, okay, I think I have a solution. So yeah, I think this might work. So I think what I'm gonna do, rather than making the seam allowance smaller, which I could do, it's just I'm afraid that if I don't leave enough raw edge for the seam allowance on the inside, it'll come undone. And that's definitely what I don't want on the mask. So because this is like experimental, we're just gonna try it. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to iron the seam allowances flat and then put the glue on top. So the glue is then going to adhere to the seam allowance on the inside. and also the fabric. And my line of thinking is, as long as there's a small strip in the middle that has glue, then the strip is gonna stay. And I'll show you what that looks like. You know what? I'm just gonna do it because it's hard to hold down the edges. I'm gonna go get my iron right now. So my iron is over in the distance. I didn't want to have my iron on my desk because one, that's a safety hazard, and two, I don't have enough plugs, nor do I want to plug my iron into the same outlet as my computer. And so just for safety reasons, it's off in the distance, so you're not going to hear me for a little bit as I iron. But in the meantime, just enjoy the background music. I will, again, try to find something different for Thursday, and I will be right back. Alrighty, so I keep flipping back and forth how I'm gonna do this, so I just went for it. To figure out what I'm gonna do with that. That's okay. This needs to be cut because that's also a little bit of seam allowance. Bloop. Okay. So I'm gonna show you two things with this photo. Segues. It looks like we got a little banana going on. Oh. Yo, okay. Nice. I can just change the photo. Okay, so what we got here is I put the applique glue on the inside, and then at the same time as I was ironing this on, I was folding in the seam allowance so that it is nicely folded on top of the glue. And so the whole idea is that the glue is gonna iron the seam allowance shut so that there's no way that the seam allowance is going to come out this end. Like if this is ever like in the wash or something tugs on it, then it's gonna make sure that it stays in here and it isn't gonna start unraveling. Yeah, so then when I top stitch it up here, then it'll stitch right on top of the seam allowance, which means that it won't it won't come undone just because the frayed edge is far away from the actual seam line. And then everything in here is going to be just flat because the glue is going to help adhere it to the base. And the second thing I wanted to point out with this photo is that it's a little bit of the lighting, but as you can see here on this edge, this side of the glue, it looks a little bit like darker, a little bit more transparent instead of like being opaque over here. And that's how you know that this glue is ready, that it's been ironed long enough. You'll start being able to see like the pattern, the yellow stripes going up and down throughout the fabric. You're gonna start seeing that become more apparent here. And the biggest thing is that you don't want to iron, because you're going to be ironing the glue twice. You don't want to iron it for too long the first time, because then it's going to lose all of its stickiness and it's not going to stay for the next transfer process. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this one, finish the other one, and I'll come back with the completed photo, and then I will do the black strips. Alrighty, so it's nicely pressed. Since you know what one side of it looks like when it's pressed, I'm just gonna flip it around so that you could see what it looks like from the front. And ideally, we want to see nice, even edges. We want to see the, oops, it's a little worm. I was watching Miss Pomurain Puff of Niji-Sanji Ian play Slither.io earlier. That's just like a fun game to play. I think I don't have the patience to spend that long like trying to get big, you know, get swole. And I do know that like sacrificial lambs help expedite the process. And so having a lot of people like watch your streams would make it easier to get bigger. But also like she was just chilling. She wasn't trying to like attack anyone. Become dominant worm. Okay, so now I'm going to change the photo over on the left-hand side. Ta-da! So that's what it looks like. It looks really clean. I'm going to enlarge it. So I really like how the top edge here looks really clean. Because we cut the glue in the shape of the actual stripe, when it folded over, it fit perfectly. So you can see there's a little bit of unevenness here, a little bit of unevenness here, but honestly, that's okay. We're gonna get that regardless. We just wanna try to minimize it as much as possible. I also folded in the seam allowance here and here. This one stayed, but because I had to cut this, I don't know how fragile that is. So we'll know once we actually put it onto the mask. But I'm gonna go ahead and do this to the black stripe. All right, so I actually ran into a problem. The strip that we made for the black stripe is too long. So when I ironed it, it caused the glue that was hanging off the edge to iron itself onto my ironing board, which then becomes a mess because it won't come off the fabric of the cutting board. And then it gets on my iron and it causes my iron to get gunky. And so I have the first half of the stripe done, and then I cut the other applique strip short, so that way it doesn't it doesn't get caught. All right, going back. Okay, I'm back. So the seam allowance doesn't quite want to fold on this one, and I don't know why. You'll see that it looks quite a bit more crunchy than the other one. But if you flip it over, it still looks pretty continuous, and that's what we want, so. Maybe the change isn't too dramatic in photos, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Where is this? Okay. I don't like stuff cluttering up my folders, so I will just delete it afterward. Okay, here we go. So this is what the finished product looks like. On the right hand side, this is what we started with. On the left hand side, this is what we ended with. And so as you can see, we have glued the applique glue to the middle here on both sides, and then folded the seam allowances over so that they're more likely to stay in. And I don't have to manipulate the fabric as I am sewing or as I am gluing. I could just easily iron it onto my mask. So now what we're gonna do is we have to iron it directly onto the mask itself. Okay, and I realized something. So the top strip here, the seam allowance that we have here, is longer than the seam allowances on the bottom and on the black strip. And that is because this yellow strip, sorry, I take that back. The black strip has a longer seam allowance here than on the bottom here, or these two, because the black strip is going on the very top of the mask. And I actually didn't need to fold this over because it needs to be flat with the seam allowance for the mask, so that when I sew the mask and then flip it inside out, it actually then becomes part of the seam. And so I will show you what that means in just a second. I'm gonna align the black stripe with the mask, pin it, and then sew it, and then you'll see what we're trying to go for. So I'm only using one side of the mask. I haven't put together the mask pieces yet. What I mean by that is actually, I'll just take a picture once I align it. But I can manipulate the top mask in any way that I see fit, which is really, really nice. I actually have these little sewing clips that would be so much more efficient than pins, but I honestly don't know where I put them. They were supposed to be easily accessible, and then I lost them in everything else that I have. Oh, they're supposed to be in like a plastic bag or something. Frustrating. The clips just clip the sides of the fabric together, so I don't have to pin it, because pinning could cause a little more shifting, and the clipping is just easy. So what I'm doing here, I'm putting the wrong side, so the side of the black fabric that we don't want to show onto the right side of the mask, so the side that we do want to show. And that is because since this is the front of the mask, it's really, really big. Since this is the front of the mask, we need to make sure the front of the stripe is pointing in the same direction, so we don't accidentally sew it in the wrong direction. So I am aligning the black stripe, the edges of the seam allowance to the edges of the seam allowance of the white mask. Ooh, I am excited to sew it. I love when pieces start coming together, then it feels like I'm like accomplished, you know. Sometimes it could be a little difficult to have to wait so long to see your project come together, especially if there are many different steps. I'd say this is a little more complex of a mask design, but it is not the most complex that I've done before, and so the payoff is a little quicker than some of the other masks that I've done, because after we do the stripes and an iron on the fish, we are done. There's no other top stitching that we have to do. The top stitching is really easy. You're just following along the lines of the mask. So I'm putting in my last pin. Voila. Alrighty. One thing I didn't do was make sure that the seam allowance on the bottom edge was folded in properly, so I can actually see the frayed edges outside of the strip. And so I'm just going through and pinning those in. I realized that I made a mistake. So before I started pinning the stripe, I was supposed to remove the wax paper on the glue, so that once I iron this piece on, it'll stick directly on. But now that I've pinned it completely on, I'm going to take a picture and then undo it because I have to take out this strip of fabric. So you see a little messy, crumped up picture of the mask. I will put that on screen. Thank you guys for being patient with this process. It's the best workaround that I could do in the moment. I have to figure out what's wrong with my camera. I do plan on doing a drumroll cosplay stream. Woo! I do plan on doing a cosplay stream on Thursday, and I want to cut Polmoose 3.0 wig. And I need my camera to do that. So I will try to troubleshoot in the meantime. But today this is just what we're working with. So if you can look at the picture, I just pin the black stripe onto the right side of the mask. And now I'm going to undo it all and then take out the the strip on top of the applique glue, so that way wait a minute, I got confused. I don't need to pin it because pinning, you only need to pin if you're going to sew. However, if I iron this directly on, then I don't have to worry about pinning because it's going to stay in place because the glue is working. So I took out all the pins. I'm going to take out the top wax paper and then I'm going to iron it directly onto the mask. I'm going to make sure that my bottom seam allowances are all rolled up nicely so that they don't stick out. That would be the worst thing if they stick out of the stripe, because if they do that, then the mask will easily, the stripe will easily come undone. That is not what we want. So because the glue is glue, I am just like shoving it on, I'm shoving the seam allowance onto the glue. And fortunately it is staying because it is glue. Alrighty. And then I'm going to align it. Ooh, I'm getting excited to see how this goes. So I'm aligning the middle seam of the stripe along with the middle seam of the mask. And then I'm placing the stripe exactly where I want it to be when I iron it. So it's essentially what's on the screen except without the pins. And then I'm gonna go consult my iron, which I turn off. Always turn off your iron if you are not supervising it face to face, like it's a child. If you're not looking at it, don't leave it on because you don't want it to accidentally knock over and burn something. You don't want there to be an electrical outage and it causes a fire, anything like that. So this is just a tip for ease, but if you look at the mask on the screen, it's convex. It's pointing towards you. The mask is oriented so that it is rounded towards you. And that becomes really difficult to work with when you're ironing because you want a flat surface. And so what I do is I just make it concave. I push in the mask so that the top edge is flat on the board and the curved part is facing towards me. Again, it's a little hard to explain without the camera, but you'll see what I mean when I bring it back fully ironed. Alrighty, mission successful. It looks so good. I'm really happy with this. You never know what you're gonna get your first time around doing things. But I think it helps that I've tried making this mask 2 times before. And so I have a better idea of where I want my seam allowances to be, stuff like that. So the main thing to focus on when you see this image is the bottom edge is folded inward, so there aren't going to be any frayed edges on the bottom. The bottom isn't exposed, so you can see on the right hand side, I'm gonna post it real quickly right here. So as you can see on the right hand side, there are loose threads. I can't remember if it's called the waft or the weft. I think those are weft. Doesn't matter. Those threads, are coming out because there's nothing, they're just exposed. So if you rub up against it, or if you like move it with your fingers, you can actually just like pull up the threads. So the bottom seam allowances are all nicely. That's interesting. So I actually lifted up the bottom of the seam allowance, and what I didn't expect like now that I think about it, I'm like, that makes sense. But what I didn't expect is the stripe to actually like lift off the mask. I think if I want to avoid that, then I should have put the glue, instead of in the seam allowance, I should have put the glue on top of the seam allowance. And maybe the next time I do it, I could do that. I'll have to see. I'll have to see what's better. So you can see the top edge, the frayed edge is along the frayed edge of the mask, so we don't worry about that. You can actually see the glue line. That's where the applique glue is, and that is the limit at which I can sew. But here, the applique glue, so this is the bulk of the stripe. The applique glue is adhering the black fabric to the white fabric. But here, it's not doing that because the applique glue is inside of this seam allowance. And actually, I put it on the inside because I thought, you know what, if I put it on the outside, then there's going to be a gap between the black fabric and the seam allowance, which might cause it to shift. But now that I'm looking at this, since the glue is inside the seam allowance, if I sew on top of it, does that mean there's going to be a little pocket here? Because there's space between where it's actually glued and the edge where I'm actually going to sew. So that's something that I will be experimenting with. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to the yellow stripe. You might ask, what about the top? Like, what are we going to do about that? The top part requires sewing. That'll be a step. That would be one of the final steps that we do before like fully assembling the mask. So we're just going to ignore that for now, and then work on the yellow stripe. So now I'm going to invert my mask so that it is no longer facing away from me, but it's facing towards me. And then I'm going to remove the strips. I don't know if you can hear that. It's like pulling like wax paper ASMR. I'm pulling the wax paper off of the glue so that I can align it to where I want and then just sew. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't like. No, I shouldn't cut it anymore. Okay. I took those pieces off. I'm going to press the seam allowances where I can onto the glue so that way it stays put and it doesn't come undone while I'm shifting the fabric, while I'm shifting the orange fabric on the white fabric. Okay, that's done. Right side done. I'm moving on to the left side. And this is from last stream, but I made the orange stripe really long. I added some extra seam allowance to it just in case it needed more width, because it tends to be, if the yellow stripe is, since the yellow stripe is going on a wider part of the mask, I just assumed that it would require more fabric to cross that distance. And so I added a little extra there. Ooh! I like where this is going. Okay. I'm going to place it about maybe 1.5 centimeters, about half an inch down from the previous stripe, from the black stripe. And so this is actually getting a little hard to place because the mask is convex. It's coming out towards me. So it isn't aligning on both sides of the mask. So now I'm gonna shove it on the inside, and then it's a little easier to manipulate when it's inside of the mask. What I can also do, which I think might be easier, is I'm gonna fold the mask in half and then do one side at a time, because it's impossible to lay it out completely flat on one edge. There's a little risk to that in that it might not be completely centered, but that's why I'm going to center it and then iron it. Okay. I'm gonna go iron it. Oh my god. The glue wasn't sticking. I was having a really hard time manipulating the fabric so that it would stay. And I realized it's because the heat setting wasn't on the gun. It was off. It's okay. I turned on the iron. And now we're gonna try again. It's looking a lot better. Alright, finally finished. The alignment in the middle isn't what I wanted. It actually has an extra curve to it that gives it an extra like line. A different view to it. Off the top of my head, I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks. So it might be that I have to change the design, change the curvature actually of the yellow stripe just to make it more straight. So it doesn't have this weird like macaroni shape to it. It looks like it's like a piece of noodle on the mask. Maybe you'll see what I mean in a moment. It really just looks like a piece of noodle. There we go. So in terms of the way that the edges of the fabric look, it looks fantastic. Everything is staying where it needs to. If it doesn't, I'm not too concerned about that because I know I will be top stitching, so it will be contained in the fabric anyways. I think what also made that centerpiece so different is that I had a hard time aligning the center to the center of the mask because it kept shifting. Because the stripe is so curved and the mask is also curved, I had a hard time keeping it aligned. Thank you, Friar. Yeah. So, other than that, I think it looks great. I'm going to cut off the edges, the extra edges of the yellow, so we know for sure that we don't need it to be that long. I'm gonna go ahead and measure it and then write it down so I know how much to actually take off. That's like 7/8 of an inch longer than what it needs to be. So I'm just putting the template on the mask and yeah, I'm just gonna straight up cut it off. Yeet. Alright, so and then I'm gonna label that this is the edge of the fabric, so that way I don't add an extra seam allowance. Edge. Alrighty. Alright, so I cut off one edge, I'm gonna cut off the other edge, and then it's time to bring out the sewing machine. So now what we're gonna do, we are going to top stitch the bottom edge of the black fabric. So we're gonna top stitch this right here, and then we're gonna switch colors to the yellow, and then top stitch the top edge of the yellow stripe, and then the bottom edge of the yellow stripe. And the reason why we're doing this before we assemble the mask is because if I were to do this after the mask has been assembled, you would see and feel the stitches on the part that is on your face. And any other sort of sensation that's not supposed to be there, I don't want there. And so if I do all of this on the front of the mask, then that means it will be contained in the mask once we assemble it. Right. And the nice thing is we already have a yellow bobbin wind. It's going to be easy to set up the thread. We already have the black thread set up, so now it's just a matter of rethreading my machine and then changing out the thread when I go from black to yellow. Feels a little taut. There we go. All right. I'm gonna plug in my machine. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm gonna be muting when I have the machine on. I'm gonna go ahead and replace this image with this image because this one is now outdated. So we're going to remove, yes, and place this back over my figgy. There we go. And now, hi chat, I haven't seen you in a while. I don't like this. My thread is really taut. It is not wanting to pull nicely through the machine. And I'm afraid, yeah, it's definitely gonna mess with the tension of the machine. I'm gonna rethread it, first of all, and then try to figure out a way that the thread can fall more smoothly onto the machine. Like that. Okay, so I put it over my lamp, and then I also put it over my camera arm. Six, 7, automatic needle threader. Oops. Nice. And done. Okay, so now I'm gonna pull my thread. Yeah. Oh, that was an accident. Okay. Oh, it's still really tight. I don't know what to do. Because this technique that I used, it worked before. You know, that's a little better. It's still a little more, there's still a lot of tension, but it's not as much as before. Let's see if I can just put this directly beneath. Or I'll move my lamp over. There we go. That's a lot better? Question mark? It's better than before. Essentially, if I'm not careful, if the thread isn't falling naturally on its own to the machine, it'll create extra tension. It'll mess up the existing tension within the machine, and things will go crazy on the machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute while I'm sewing, and I'll also show you a picture of how it looks after. So I already cut off the parts of the thread that were sticking out just to make sure everything is nice and continuous. It looks really clean with the edges sewed down. I did realize that this fabric is not completely black. It is gray, and I mentioned it before. I keep calling it black because it essentially, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, that's black. So the black thread stands out a little bit on the mask, but it's not really that big of a difference. The picture that I have is actually a little messy. You can sort of see what I mean. I tried to get as close to the edge as possible. Here. So you can see I tried to stay consistently along the edge here. I think I could get a little bit closer so that you have less of this lip. But yeah, so now I'm going to try it out with the yellow. You can actually see this little bit here, I guess like the nose. It wouldn't stay folded inside the fabric because this area is a little bulky. So then I'm going to go ahead and sew it. Actually, before that, I'm going to take the black thread out of my machine and then change it with the yellow thread. But not only that, I have to change out the bottom thread to yellow. Actually, I have a little bit of like a pink, like a salmon pink. And because it's the bottom thread, I don't think it's gonna show up that much. I also do have a gold already existing. So I think the gold would be The gold would be fine as well. I'd rather do that than the pink because I think the pink will show through a lot. So I'll use the gold bobbin thread so I don't have to wind it. I just have to string the top thread. I would show you guys how to thread the machine, but again, my camera is not working. Turn the wheel to make sure that the hook is facing towards the sky. That way it'll catch my thread as I put it through. Alright, I pulled the bottom thread through and we are now all set. Snip off any extra. And then I'm gonna top stitch. Hello, Melly. Is it Melly? Melee? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. But thank you for being here. One edge done. Alright, top edge is done. Yay! Looks really good. I was able to sew down the edge that was not cooperating. And it looks great. Actually sewing that sewing the yellow strip with black thread was not the move. You can see the black thread through it. Thank you, Melly. Ah, nice. Yeah. Because I'm just working on things and explaining as I go, my streams are not too eventful. But I just think it's fun to see it in real time. With a lot of videos being edited to like show you the expedited version, sometimes it seems like it's a little bit out of reach. Because the timeline is all butchered up to make a video. But having a full-on stream where you see the process as it goes, it gives a new meaning to like made by hand, I guess. And I'm glad you can work along with this stream. Good luck on all your work. I will now post a picture of what the mask looks like. And I think it's really not gonna stand out until we sew the final thing. And so I'm still very excited about that. I love top stitching though. It looks so clean. I love I love firm edges, folded edges that are sewed on top. So not just like creating a seam, but specifically stitching for decorative purpose. There we go. Alrighty. This mask looks a little squashed. This one is not as squashed. So, ta-da! So now this is what it looks like. Whee! Now that has a top stitch on top. I think it looks really, really clean. I love that the most about top stitching. You still see this edge here and there. And sometimes I wasn't as consistent as others, which is something that, honestly, I think it just takes years of practice. Like, that's why I'm not really hard on myself for trying to stick by the edges, just because the more often I do it, the better at it I'll become. And so I'm not too stressed out about that. But now what we're gonna do, what we could do right now is just iron on the fish, but that order doesn't matter because the fish is just going to be put on the front of the mask. And I can iron it on at any time. There's, if I iron it on while the bottom of the mask is on there too, it's not like glue is going to be like messed up or anything. So I'm going to save that for the end, like the icing on the cake. But now I'm going to grab my second mask piece and then start sewing them together. But in order to do that, I have to flip this inside out. Because when you are creating something that has a wrong side and a right side, as in like an inner side and an outer side, you have to start with the wrong sides facing out, because then it's like a pillowcase. When you flip it over, then it shows everything that it's supposed to, and the seams aren't out showing where the right side is. Yeah, go like pull a pillowcase off, flip it inside out, and you'll see the inner seams of the pillowcase. And then when you flip it the other way around, then you see you don't see the seam on the outside. So I need to change. What color am I gonna do? I think white. So I'm going to change my thread from yellow to white because the base of the mask is white. So I don't want any other color to show through and really like take away from the colors, just like using black thread did on the yellow. So I'm gonna go snip, 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 pull that out. Put this away because I'm not going to need it for any other thing. I just need it for top stitching, which is really easy. Then I don't have to wind up bobbin thread so much. Take out the bobbin, replace it with white thread. What's nice about my white thread, oh, ha ha ha, JK, this is that's my old white thread. I'm using the my white thread is on the same spool as the black thread, so I have to set it up in the same way that I did the black thread. Okay. I've had this, the Across the Spider-Verse soundtrack stuck in my head. It's glorious. Alright, threading. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, go, and then finally threading the machine. Okie dokie. Make sure I don't accidentally pull out the thread. Then I turn the hand wheel, pull the bobbin thread through the machine so that it's out, and then we're all set. So I'm gonna grab a secondary piece. Ooh! Oh, I actually wanted to take a picture of this. So on the wrong side of the mask that we just prepared, I had my lines of where I wanted the fabric to go, and we can actually see a comparison of where I wanted it to go and then where it is now. So if you look on the inside here, I'm gonna really enlarge this. These were the lines I originally drew. So this is what I based the templates off of. And as you can see, this bottom line here for the black thread, where the black stripe is pretty on point. And I honestly didn't expect that to happen because I tend to be a little careless when I'm working. Things tend to change. So when it aligns perfectly like this, I'm like, what? And so I'm looking at this bottom edge here. I actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think this small like 1/4 inch gap was really too small. So while I was ironing it, I decided to push it down a little more, and I think it gives a lot more space. It doesn't feel as congested. So another thing to point out is that the width right here, the width between the two stitches is bigger than the width here. So that's something I need to look into. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm okay with it being bigger, but in order to like learn why this happened, so in case I don't want it, I can learn to avoid it, I'm gonna look into that. Other than that, super cool. This next part is easy. So what I'm going to do is flip this so that it's like pointing out towards us, and then place the back side of the mask against this one, and then sew around the edges. Not completely though. I'm gonna leave like a 2-inch gap at the bottom here. That way I can flip it inside out. But otherwise, because the two mask pieces that I have are completely separate from one another, I'm going to stitch them together. And my seam allowance is typically about 1/2 inch. But because the edge here is more about of a 1/4 inch seam allowance, even though I wanted it to be 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm gonna do 1/4 inch just to be on the safe side. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute and do that. And we need to remember the rule, right sides together. So the side that has all the stripes is going to face inward, and then what will be facing me when I'm putting it together is the inner part of the mask from the back side. I've aligned it quite nicely. All the edges line up almost seamlessly. The only thing is that when I'm sewing it, I don't want it to move, because if I move, the alignment is going to be off, and sometimes there's going to be less fabric on one side than the other, and it causes it to come undone when I flip it inside out. So I'm going to pin it in 2 places, just in the center of the mask, to make sure that the main parts of the mask don't shift while I'm sewing. Alrighty, so I sewed around the edges of the mask. Sewing around flat surfaces is so nice because it's just so easy. When you're doing curves or when you're working with something that it doesn't sit flat on the table. I did mention that the mask doesn't sit flat on the table, but at least when it's going through the sewing machine, the edges of the mask are flat. So I left a little hole in the bottom corner for me to flip it inside out. I'm gonna turn on my iron just so that it's ready by the time it comes out. Okay. I'll take a picture of what it looks like in this state. Alright, sorry, my lighting's a little off. Because the sewing machine is in the center of my desk, I'm taking pictures on the side. So that's why it looks like it has some pretty sharp, gross lighting. But it is what it is. As long as I can get the point across, that's what matters. So many images saved. Okie dokie, here we go. So it looks pretty square now along the edges, which is a good thing. I want it to look as nicely put together as possible. So now time for the moment of truth. We're gonna flip it inside out. I've sewed many a mask right on the wrong side. So like the one side is facing the right direction and the other one is not. And so I've had to undo the stitches. And that actually becomes an issue. The more you undo your seams, the less integrity your fabric has. Ooh. Alrighty, so I did not stitch correctly on the top edge of the fabric, so now there's this little hole. I'm going to add a separate image for this. So I need to flip it inside out and correct that, make sure that like I sew that properly so it doesn't come undone. And call this number 1. Okay. Why are these ones so big? Alright. That's a hole. And we do not want holes in the mask. So I'm gonna flip it inside out, figure out why I totally just missed it. Okay, I see. So the fabric on the mask that has the stripes on it, that was aligned, but the bottom edge of the mask wasn't. So I'm gonna pull the fabric up over that space and then sew again over it. Alright, so this is a volume warning. I don't think it's that loud, but if you guys wanted to hear what my sewing machine sounds like, I'm gonna go ahead and run it through for this very briefly. So if your noises are set really loud, just turn it down a little bit. Alright, so I won't be sewing like that again before knowing what it sounds like. But I actually went through twice on it. It is not necessary. I think it's gonna stay as long as I give it enough seam allowance. But I wanted to make sure it was never, ever going to come out again. Yes. Okay, I actually noticed another area that is compromised. It's towards the top, so I'm gonna go ahead and mute and fix that. If I didn't leave enough seam allowance, then I just dig deeper into the fabric. You want to try to avoid that because you want your measurements, you want the dimensions to be as accurate as possible, but it's not always the case, so that's why you always leave extra seam allowance. Alrighty, easy fix. Now I'm gonna turn it inside out, and we're gonna get a drum roll. Turn it inside out. Reminder, more for myself, that my iron is still on. I heard it go pop in the distance. I'm like, ha! I didn't get to it as quickly as I wanted to. That is okay. Alright, so when you're flipping it inside out, you want to poke out your edges as much as possible. You want it to be like a nice sharp crease. Oh, okay, that's unexpected, but I actually really like that. So the top of the mask, I thought it was just going to be I thought we were just gonna see black at the very top of the mask, but actually the white is folding over the edges because I think it's the fabric has been pulled a little bit taut on the back end. And so it's actually showing some white, but I really like that actually for the design. So I'm gonna go ahead and iron this, and then I will take a picture and show you what it looks like. Alrighty, so I ironed it. Going to take a picture. Maybe I need to get into an ironing board because it feels like everything I iron like isn't completely flat. Like there's some wrinkles on it. And I wonder if it's because like I have a cheap ironing board, but I might actually just have to research what an ironing board is made out of and why it helps strengthen out clothing, because then if I can like, oops. Oh. Because then if I could figure that out, then I can figure this out. Also not a flattering photo. I might just have to take a better photo. That's okay. There we go. That's what the mask looks like inside out. I think the angle makes it especially hard to see, like, well, hold on. I'll take a picture of it in half. Oops. Load. Okay, so there we go. That's what it looks like when it's folded on its side. As you can see, it has this weird angle that I was talking about. I don't know. Because there's different things that I could do. I can try to make sure that there's enough separation here, up here, because this is definitely not the same width as this. When I was only doing one side and I did the other, this placement was really high. So I can try to focus on changing the placement of this. I can also make this less curved because like the template, it reaches up to this midpoint right here. So what if I just made it more flat and then it reached to a point lower than up here? But other than that, I think it turned out pretty well. Looking at it now, it's still not as clean as I would like it, because like I think I'm comparing it to industrially made stuff where the lines are extremely exact and then it's just, but for handmade, I'd say that this is it looks pretty good. What I still have to do, so I'm looking at the time, it is 4 o'clock exactly. What I'm going to do off stream, and then I'll post it when I finish it today, is do a top stitch in white, probably in white, not in black, because the black is going to stick out on the white, but do a top stitch here and on the bottom. Fold these edges over and sew them down so that straps could come in through here, and then iron on the little fishy. Actually, I'm gonna iron on the little fishy right now, so that'll be the conclusion to our stream. But I'm really happy that in 2 streams we were able to figure out the design, set it up, and then execute it in the next stream. I was anticipating it was gonna take a little longer, and I didn't want the series to be dragged out that far. But this worked out really, really well. So I'm gonna go over. I think. Oh no, I turned off my iron. I made a habit of always turning off my iron when I leave, which is actually really, really good practice. It's even better to unplug it, but then I get lazy. So at least it's off. I'm gonna turn it on, iron on the fishy, and I will be right back. We actually need... I'm going to switch scenes real quickly. So Petra's fish... Alright, it's slightly pointing down. I was trying to determine what orientation I should have it on the mask. I guess it doesn't really matter. But what I noticed is that if the fish is pointing down, it's better if it's pointing up. Alrighty, so I unplugged my iron because that's all I'm gonna need it for today. I realized I did make a mistake in the order. So earlier I said, oh, it doesn't matter what order I put in the fish, because the fish just needs to be ironed on, which is true. But what I didn't account for is that I wanted to top stitch on top of it and give it a little smile. So now that I assembled the mask, I cannot go back and top stitch it, which is okay. Visually, it doesn't look bad. I'm just worried it's gonna fray. I think it's gonna fray regardless. I can put on some extra fray check. Fray check is a chemical that prevents the edges from coming undone. It's more like a glue. You're just plastering on some glue to the edges to prevent it from fraying. But I find, especially for these masks where you're washing them, they still are going to come out over time. I will go ahead and take a picture of the little fishy. I think the colors look really, really good together. It looks really clean, which I really, really enjoy. Oh, did not save my photo? I did. Boop. Yeah, thank you, Melly. Yeah, I think that's the most fun about this. Just sharing the creative process, and it's nice not doing this all in my head as well, because it just keeps me moving. There we go! Woohoo! So this, I don't know why it looks like that. I think it's just the lighting, but it has these little like crisscrosses on this. But I ended up placing the fish, like, instead of pointing upward, just straight to give it, I guess just to like balance out the design, because you have two angles going up, so to make it like centered, like grounded, I faced the fish in that direction. I don't know if that's actually how you're supposed to think about it, but that's what I did anyways. But yeah, so now again, all I'm gonna do is just top stitch the edges here, do the sides, and then thread the little elastics through it, and then be done. So thank you everyone for being here for this process. I'm really excited that we actually got to finish it, and you guys will see the final picture on Twitter, and I will put up a poll to see how much interest there is for a Petra mask to be sold. Yeah, because I think it is simple enough. Thank you, Frag. It's simple enough where it'd be easy to manufacture in like a short period of time. And so I just sort of have to prepare myself for it, as in like get all the materials that I need, make sure all my templates are right, make sure I understand the process really well so I can just like go right into it. But look out for that poll, and make sure to vote if you are interested in a Petra mask for yourself. Alrighty, thank you everyone. So this is the end of the Petra Mask series. Next week, I am going to choose a different project to work on, a different project to start on, and then we will do that together. So have a good day, everyone. I will see you guys on Thursday. I will be doing a cosplay wig cutting stream. I'm going to try to figure out my camera and get it to work and not touch it next time. So it doesn't stop working. But sounds good. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.